Being the leader of a nonprofit organization today is not easy. How do I face the challenges of our rapidly changing society? How do I lead and evolve my organization to ensure relevancy in my community? How do I engage my board, my staff, and my volunteers to embrace the changes I need to make? Thankfully, the Oʻahu Economic Development Board has created a television series to help. Ikawa Mamua, Ikawa Mahope.
Aloha and welcome to Ikawa Mamua, Ikawa Mahope. This is a program created in partnership with the Oʻahu Economic Development Board and Olelo as a concept to provide the community with insight and guidance as to how organizations that may be dealing with various operational issues can become self-sustaining and thrive, which is not only good for business, but for our community and our state as a whole. Pono Shim is the Executive Director of the Oʻahu Economic Development Board, and welcome. And
thank you, Jill.
Let me first start by asking you why you felt that this program that we've had is important.
You know, in the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, there are a lot of organizations, individuals, board members, staffers, who cross my path, and many of them are going through real difficult times in their organizations. 10 years ago, when I was asked to take the leadership of this organization, I think that we were ahead of everybody's time in the crisis. And thankfully, with a group of leaders that were assembled to lead the organization on its board, they went in a direction that I don't think most people thought that they should or would. And today, we've kind of become an anomaly of organizations that were like ours. Because of that, many people are coming and asking, you know, for direction. They're asking for help, guidance. And I felt that maybe by looking back deeply, we can help people to find their future. And that's the foundation of why I think that it was important. And also I felt it was important for folks, especially directors, boards of directors, to hear the kind of thought processes that went into making difficult decisions and changing the direction of an organization. Quite often, I think so much emphasis is placed on what is its mission. Maybe what they have to do is look at a new mission and redirect the objectives of the organization.
Well, yeah, so let's go back to the first segment. And as many have already know, that this was actually a 3-part series. So in the first segment, we sat down with Colbert Matsumoto, Robbie Alm, and Alan Uedo, who have served or are serving on the board of the OEDB. And they discussed the recognition phase, which is often the hardest problem for any organization or business to admit that you actually have a problem. So there are three takeaways from that segment. And one, that it was necessary for the OEDB to change the message of promoting Hawaii as a place to do business and make money, to where it becomes one that these companies add value to Hawaii and how to better educate people doing business in Hawaii on how to build a community. Also, another takeaway was when it comes to finding leaders, sometimes you have to take a risk. And then the third takeaway from that was also that the fundamentals of a leader needs to be one who is motivated not for themselves, but for the benefit of the organization. So my question is, how do you begin the process of deciphering what the problem is within your organization?
Well, one of the first things that I think is important is to show up, is to be present in the community. Because we work in economics, I think it's so simple to lean and deflect all the different things that people are requesting of us in the concept of we're here to promote and develop business. I think the first thing was showing up, which is recognizing, for us at least, that people are the economy. And what is it that we're doing to strengthen our people, which is strengthening the economy? Listening and going out and showing up for anything that I was invited was the first thing, because I didn't have a foundation of economics. But I knew that I could show up and I could listen and learn. And from that, maybe develop that connective tissue that starts to reveal the significance of what everyone is doing and how it's connected to this fabric of Hawaii's economy. I think one of the things that people are very concerned about today is funding and finances. Mm-hmm. Well, when we took over the organization, well, when I was the CEO, we had a monthly burn rate of a very small nonprofit of about $90,000 a month, and that is huge. And so we had to recognize that that is not sustainable. And so within 3 months, the hard work was taking it down from $90,000 to $36,000. And what that was doing was it would allow us the opportunity, or allow me the opportunity, to now, without having to focus on all that funding, to go and meet with the community. So I could spend time, invest the time, and listen to the voices. And that, I think that's one of the first things is, you know, what's happening out there? And not try to get attention, but to give it.
We'll talk about the financing part of it a little bit later, because I think that's the topic that many businesses and nonprofits are all dealing with right now. But I also want to go back to another topic, which is something that Robbie addressed, which was about finding the leaders, and sometimes you have to take a risk, sometimes you have to think differently. But how do you find the right people to step up to lead? I think that's another process in recognizing you might have an issue within your organization.
Maybe I'm foolish to a fault, and that I just want to assume that people have something in Hawaii that is so deeply special about innovation and creation and being pioneers. But our education, our political, economic systems have taught us that there are processes that we have to adhere to and observe. And so how do you find them? I believe it's in people. It's more, how do you pull it out of people? And that's the premise for which I engage with people. That it's not finding the people, because the people are there. It's, can I pull it out? Can I pull out what's needed in the community by engaging with them, so that that resource that may be hidden comes to the forefront, and then it's not about marginalizing someone or edifying someone else, but maybe whatever that is, that gift is part of the whole, which creates the leadership. And I think that's what the second panel was talking about ecosystems, and that recognizing that the value that each person has. For me, when they selected me, that was really, as they express, so opposite of what most people thought. But it was Colbert who really emphasized to me when we first met, and he talked about that engagement, that this foundation of really having a philosophy about how special our home is, and it not being a theory, but it's being a part of our lifestyle, that would be, you know, the foundation that we could build upon. And so it wasn't any skills that I had in economics, it was that which he felt was the platform that we could go and bring and acquire the kinds of talent or the conversations or even initiatives that were necessary, but it had to be girded with that first.
Well, let's go on to that second segment, which in that segment, the three of them discussed about how to use change to move forward. Right. Some of the takeaways on that was a discussion that centered around business looking inward to ask the question about their value. And part of that was being a part of an ecosystem.
Right.
So what is that thinking that you're part of a bigger whole?
You know, one of the first individuals that I met with, I must have been in the position for 3 months. She was leading one of the federal organizations for the Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration. And she is someone who has done so much for Hawaii during her tenure in that position, brought so many grants to Hawaii from the Department of Commerce. And she wanted to meet me, so we had a meeting in my office. And she said, so is that your vision, to convene people? Is that your vision, to get everybody convened and working together? And I said, no, that's not my vision. That's just the process. If I didn't have to do that, I wouldn't do that. That's just the process. So she said, so what's your vision then? And I'm going to kind of preempt that, because when we sat down, this was the first thing she said to me. She said, you know, contrary to popular belief, I don't determine who gets funding. I just help people to apply. And then she asked me, what's your vision? And I said, it's really kind of simple. I just hope that maybe one day my grandchildren, if I have some, or great-grandchildren, can come up to me and just ask this question. Papa, is it true that we used to have wars over oil? Is it true that we had people who starved to death every day because they didn't have enough food? Is it true that we had people who lived without a roof over their head, not by choice? Is it true that children couldn't get the finest education they wanted anywhere in the world? Is it true? It's true. I said, that's my vision, that maybe someday my great-grandchild can walk up to me and ask me that question, because then you know what? That means it's done. I said, it's kind of simple. And she looked at me and she said, you know, contrary to popular belief, funding doesn't go to projects. Funding goes to leaders, and you're going to get yours. And I just thought to myself, what just happened? Because at the beginning she says, she doesn't determine. Now she's saying, you're going to get funding. And it helped me to understand that what people are looking for are people who really are listening and caring and giving their attention to folks, not getting their attention, not seeking the attention, and that is actually the foundation of the answer for that question, you know, about that change. It's about changing from trying to get attention and trying to forward our own initiatives, and instead giving people your attention and finding how what you do is relevant in that desire, that search, you know, as you go and give people your attention.
Right, the question, asking the question, economic development for whom?
Yes.
Is what was brought up in the discussion. And
telling the story large enough that everyone can find themselves in that story. You know, I think what Gail had realized when she asked me that question, and it just, no one really ever asked me that before. And when she got my answer, and we've become very, very good friends, I think she realized that the vision I had was large enough that everyone could fit in it. And I think that is something that maybe is very, very critical to leadership today, when we're looking at change, especially when we're living in a time where so many folks are being marginalized.
Something that was brought up in that second segment, Patrick said it, sometimes change comes when there's no other options.
Good.
And part of that was the communication as well. Finding the right people who agree with those changes is often a difficult process. So my question is, how do you elevate the conversation to a higher level about accepting those changes and getting others in your organization to understand the concept of being part of a culture, a commitment to Hawaii, and to have a shared future?
So I'm going to use you as an example. Because here your father is from Maui, you know, your family's from, and then you grew up and you were born and raised on the mainland. And then you come home, and this is your home. And you chose this place to be your home, to raise your son, and for your husband to serve in the community that he does. Quite often, I think what we're so concerned about is the visitor or the aspiring resident, not ourselves, and how we look at our home, how we care for our home. And that, I think, was the foundation of what Patrick was saying, as well as Colbert, Robbie, and Alan. A few years ago, there's this businessman from Massachusetts who sends me a LinkedIn message. And he says that he has this great business that produces pharmaceuticals for cancer in Asians. And his cancer pharmaceuticals, medicine goes to, you know, Korea, Japan, China, and he wants to consider opening up a laboratory and a production facility in Hawaii. So he asked me, what kind of incentives are there to attract someone who's going to get bring high-paying jobs, great products to Hawaii? So what kinds of things, what kind of tax benefits, what kind of permitting opportunities are for people to attract people like me who will be really good for your community? And my reply to him was, I'm sorry, I don't do business this way. The next time you're in Hawaii, I'd be glad to sit down with you. Now, that's not coming from a place of arrogance. That's coming from a place, to me, of helping someone who's considering coming to Hawaii to understand that there's a way to be a part of this community at the very onset. Mm-hmm. So he replies, I'm going to be here on this date. Immediately replies, I'm going to be here on this date. I'd be glad to meet with you. So I'm the first person he meets with when he comes. He comes to my office and he makes very nice conversation. I know he's already Googled me. He tells me about his business, and then he says, so what kinds of incentives are there for me, you know, to attract somebody like me who's really good for our community? And I said, nothing. And he says, well, maybe you folks want to consider doing things that would attract somebody like me who would be really good for your community. And I said, no. No. Why should we do that for you? We don't even do that for our own people. And the guy says, man, you are straight. I said, listen, Hawaii is my home. And you know what I don't have for my home? I have no exit strategy for my home. Hawaii's not perfect. And we've got our problems. We've got our struggles. But you know what? It's my home. And I love our people and I love my home. And he says, well, there are reasons that would be good for me to come to Hawaii. Like, you know, it's heritage, it's culture, the beauty of this place, the weather. I said, right. And you need to decide if that's good enough for you, because it's good enough for me. And I take everything with that. And again, he said, man, you are straight. I don't know how many people would have done it that way, but I want to believe that's what my board was hiring. And when Patrick talks about that there are no other options, we have no options if this is our home. And throughout the world today in business schools or business presentations, quite often the one thing that people are interested in is the exit strategy. Well, you know what? We don't have one for our home. And that's what I really believe Patrick was talking about. And that's where innovation comes from.
So what happened with the businessman?
So a month later, he sends me another LinkedIn message, and he says, you know, I met a lot of people after I met you who know you and really respect what you do and how you live your life. And he said, I've returned to a blizzard. And you are absolutely right. There are reasons for me that are really good to consider coming to Hawaii. And he said, would you help me if I come to Hawaii and open up my business? And he didn't come, and I think it's because when he did his due diligence that he couldn't just make it work. It wasn't because he was looking at external factors. It was now he had to look at what he really, how his operations, his business plan, and it didn't work. But if sometime in the future that changes, I think that he always knows that there's a perspective of how you come and you be a part of this community. And I think that he also would share the same thing with other people. But he didn't come, but he did ask for help.
And that's a good start.
Yeah.
That's a good way. Most businesses can start thinking as
right.
well.
And then there are others who we've had similar conversations like that, and they've come.
Let's go on to the third segment. And in that discussion about creating the future, the idea was that you've already recognized the problem, you've made the changes and solutions, so what's next? And in this third segment, we spoke with Mahina Paishan Duarte, Nelson Lau and Tyler Tokioka. And some of what was touched upon was this paradigm shift in the thinking about doing business in Hawaii as being part of the ecosystem. And I know Mahina spoke about, in terms of education, and how she's trying to instill in her students the critical thinking and giving them the tools to understand their role and their relevance in the community. Right. And then in the story shared by Tyler, it was a fundamental value in a successful, long-time, locally owned company. How does an organization find its relevance?
You know, I think that the question is really, how do we reveal it? How do we reveal the relevance? And what Tyler's family is sharing is that the community, especially Hawaii, and whether you're in business or not, Hawaii has given so much to all of us as a place that is so special. That moat that surrounds these islands is so large that it allows us, you know, certain privileges of isolation that some folks may not appreciate, but I think is a real gift. Because of that, we've really been blessed by this land and its natural resources. And I think for a family like Tyler's, who, you know, as all of us came as immigrants, as they came as plantation workers, and then were able to set up a foundation of a company that serves the community and for reasonable gain, then feels this obligation or this great gratitude that goes and gives back to the community. That's really, to me, what I really appreciated about Tyler and his family, and what I wanted him to share is that perspective about being a part of a community. Now, with Mahina's conversation, Mahina is dealing with so much when students are, you know, just in their early teens, who don't believe that they're going to be able to live in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Because if you look at the economics, it just doesn't work. So I just have these simple kind of philosophies that the only way to transform the economics of any geographic region, there's only one way. And we've heard so many different inputs from it, but it's kind of simple. The only way to transform the economics of a geographic location is to reverse what we've become really good at. And what are we good at? What are we experts at? We are experts at exporting money and importing expertise, period. We export so much money for energy, for food, for knowledge, for hardware, for software, for education, consulting, plans. We export so much money for all of that. Is there any wonder why we're broken? So the first thing to me is we must reverse that, and that's to discover or recover what it is that we are experts at. But that also has to lead to that which can contribute to the rest of the world, because we need to export it. So first we need to recover it, then we need to export it. So in Mahina's education, it's about helping the kids to understand those things, but also hopefully expanding their minds large enough that their contributions, because of who they are and where they are so large that it can impact the world, so we can export that technology and we can import revenues. So it's not just about what happens here today, because we become a global world. Is what is that contribution that is so special and unique to who we are, that now we can refine and we can see how it can benefit and contribute to the rest of the world. You know, that is aloha. That is sharing the best of who we are to go and make a difference.
What about the idea of being able to bring in outside influences, to have different perspectives, whether it be global, mainland, just being able to provide a different perspective on a certain subject in order to grow, in order to change? I mean,
showing up, yeah, diversity is very, very significant. But I also believe that we're just not a diverse place. What we are and what makes us so unique, and Patrick was alluding to that when he talks about the advantages our people, it's our people in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. Quite often we're talked about being one of the most diverse places in the world, and I just disagree, because the world is diverse. What is so special about this place is we have intermarried our diversity. We are hybrids of diversity. And because of that, I believe we have the ability to see solutions and see connections that are not marginalized that other people would because of diversity. And so if we're talking about other outside influences and outside ideas, it's being open to that, but then also marrying that into the best of what we are. I think for a long time, and that's what Robbie was talking about, is we were looking at what is that next silver bullet. And it's not a silver bullet. I believe it's what we are that is taking that in, and in this very strange way that maybe we do things in Hawaii, that we can process it and we can pull something out better that connects with people. You know, and I think that's why a lot of people do come who are very, very innovative and quite wealthy to Hawaii. Not just because of our place, but there's something about our people. Well, let's take that in and then put it through this processing machines that we all carry. Then contribute.
Financing seems to be a prevailing problem, and we're seeing many organizations barely surviving. We're seeing schools closing, changes in the tax laws, cost of living, drops in donations, all because of factors about finance and why they're struggling. Because I think what you said earlier was that it's not just about making money. It's about finding your resource and what is
right.
your resource to the community. But how can you survive?
Right. So funding is critical, as we all know. And Ellen talked about that. But I believe that funding is actually a symptom of the problem. And I think today what we've become are organizations and institutions that believe that funding is the solution. But it's not the solution, it's the symptom. It's a symptom of many different factors. Some of the factors are things have changed, and Alan talked about that. And that when things change, can we move with the change? I remember when I had my concierge business in Ward 16 Theater, that was when they were doing reel-to-reel films. And so you had a projectionist. And labor was fighting hard to preserve that projectionist job and their livelihood, and it's important. But a few years later, we all could see digitization is coming. And so now you're not going to need a projectionist. So as change occurs, how do we go and work with the change and help to find that direction and opportunity within the changes? So fundraising, I think a lot of it, or financial, is telling us that things have changed. And with that change is taking some real critical infrastructure, critical processes that have been a part of the fabric of our communities. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is, again, it goes to the relevance. So Patrick spoke about having this gathering in Washington, D.C., and hundreds of people showing up. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is we didn't go and promote it. That's not what happened. I was going to Washington, D.C. for a conference, and Patrick asked if he could set up meetings for me in D.C. So he set up these meetings with folks from the Obama administration, with legislators, you know, our team, the military. And everyone was complaining about us not working together. And you know what? They're all complaining about each other. It's so interesting. You know, when you go over to the Hill, can you tell them this? And then the Hill, if you go over to the administration, can you tell it? And with one of the assistant secretaries of commerce, and she was sharing things like this with me, and I paused, and I said, "Are you talking about exercising the power to convene?" And she looked at me and Yeah. I said, you know, under Senator Inouye and Senator Akaka, we had two individuals who really could exercise the power to convene. And there are so many people in the Beltway who are connected to Hawaii, whether it was their home or whether it is still their home. And they have an affinity. And under their cadence, these people used to come together to discuss and focus on Hawaii. And since he's passed, I don't think anybody has that. So do you need me to come up here and to exercise the power to convene the people of the Beltway on a strategic plan for the economics of Hawaii? And she just looked at me and she said, would you? I said, sure, if that's what you folks need me to do. And I think the problem is that quite often people are looking for that they could be that convener, that they're the Pope. When you have a whole bunch of priests who want to be Pope, you got a problem. Because then you got flocks, right? And nobody wants to lose their flock. So I went to the next one, same thing, and everybody said, would you? So I came home and I met with my colleagues in economics, and I said, I'm going back to DC, but we're not going there to get attention, which is what most people do at the legislature or
Right.
DC. They go to get attention. What is attention? Money. I said, we're not going there to get attention. We're going there to give them ours. We need to go there to give them our attention. We need to learn what everybody is doing and all the resources they bring back to Hawaii and really figure out how it connects to Hawaii so that we can help them to be successful in what they're doing. Because most people who are looking at funding are looking for what they need, not what all that funding needs to be successful, for them to be relevant. And so I started working with these two senators' committees, offices, their staffs, and they put together this whole thing with the understanding that we were coming to give people our attention, not get their attention. And when that went out, hundreds and hundreds of people showed up. You know why? Because we went there to listen to them. We went there to hear what it is they do, what they wanted to do, how we could connect that back. And it's so opposite of what everybody else is doing, which is, I'm trying to go and get attention for my initiative, which is it. And I think that answers the question about how do you bring relevance and how do you make yourself an asset. And it's also recognizing, again, the picture's large enough that everyone has something. How do they all connect? And they need to be successful. So how do we help that to happen? Does that answer your question?
I think so, to some degree, but I do think that people still feel that, you know, the bottom line is they have to have operational costs.
That's right.
And those basically come back to how are we going to be able to fund those.
Right.
And
so what happened was, you know, as I mentioned, we cut from 90 to 36. And what that was, it's really putting yourself on life support. But that's giving you time to go and really learn what is needed, what can you do to fulfill the needs of the community and establish your relevance. And so we had to go through that. And then through this process, we became relevant again. And it's not something which happens instantaneously. I lost a job in 2000, and I was offered quite a few. And I very purposefully told my wife when I lost the job that I can't take any of these offers, because something is telling me a crisis is coming in economics, in the job market, and jobs will be lost, will never return. So I need to start a business, because I need to rediscover and recover the human spirit and human capacity to innovate and create. In 2001, on September 8th, 3 days before September 11th, I started a company. Now, that's kind of the worst time to start a new business, because I told her I needed to embrace a struggle. I needed to struggle because I needed to understand what it means to be innovative and creative. And what's so interesting is many folks during that era who are doing career changes were getting into finance and capital and mortgages. And it's almost like people were living large, but I was going to the gym to work out because I needed to struggle. I needed to understand. And I chose not to go down that finance perspective, but to go down the recreation. And 8 years later, I was asked to be, or 7 years later, I was asked to become the CEO of this organization. Some of the concern I have for the organizations and the leaders who are running these organizations is, number one, they're feeling like failures. Because these are iconic institutions that during the Inouye years were getting huge amounts of funding because it was flowing in Hawaii. And so I call this part of the Inouye effect. That for 6 years, this has been gone, and their coffers are dry. But they're feeling like failures, and I don't think that's fair, because it's not necessarily their fault. You know, the winds have changed. My hope is that maybe through this program or through meeting or helping them, that they're going to rediscover and discover that brilliance of innovation and creation that I really believe is in the DNA of our people. And so quite often when I'm meeting with people, it's not about getting them to change. Because I believe if we could just go back 2 or 3 generations, any of us, we would find some of the greatest pioneers. And a pioneer is an innovator. And so it's not really about changing. It's about recovering what's in our past. That's ika wā mamua. It's looking deeply past. It's not saying that's who my father was. It's what did he do? So that I could recognize that that's part of the spirit I carry, that innovation, that struggle, that creation, that it's not just resilience, it's grit. Because organizations are going to disappear, some of them. But what kind of community are we going to be? And does that mean that they're not needed anymore? People are not needed, or what they did wasn't needed? No, what they did is needed, and who they are is needed. But maybe the organization and its model and its practices are going to have to find a different way. And like we had to go on life support, and then we found our way.
Well, Pono, in all the discussions that we've had with the panelists before in the segments and in our discussion today, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
My predecessor, the first day we met, I asked him to tell me his story. And he shared with me all the things he had done in his past, how he was brought to Hawaii, and then the struggle. He spent about an hour and a half sharing that story with him. And after he was done, I asked him who his storytellers were, because he was such a frustrated man. He was really struggling. And he looked at me like, storytellers? Because it's not an economic question. And he just sat there for a little bit and he says, you know what, we haven't done a good job of telling the story. And I said, I know. See, if you have a story, a vision as big as you have to find those individuals who can tell the story large enough, as I mentioned. And I think my final thought is, what ika wā mamua, ika wā mahope, that looking back deeply is really about finding your story. If you want to see your future, if you really want to see the future, and the future that has meaning and contribution, I look back. And I really look back not to edify myself, but to really look for that essence of why am I here? How did I even get here? I was in an event in the Bay Area in September, and it was hosted by a foundation, which is one of the largest foundations in the world. And there were just 150 of us who were invited in this very private event. And they invited us as doers, that we are doers in this world, and it was such a privilege to be there. And there was a woman that I met. On the first day I heard her ask a question about community through some designers and developers from MIT. And she worked at the United Nations, and her question really sparked something in me that this is a lady or a woman who is carrying something so deep in what she saw, the marginalization that occurs at these massive institutions and organizations. And she was trying to teach people. All week I watched her. And then, as fate would have it, we showed up at breakfast together on the last day, so that I could talk. And at some point, she said, I need to tell you a story about refugees and migrants. And I said, Susan, I'm so sorry, but can you pause your story because I just found some medicine and I need to type this medicine in my phone before I forget it. So she looked at me quizzically and I typed what I had just been thinking and found into my phone. And then when I was done, she said, what was the medicine you found? And I said, the medicine is that we have named these people wrong. They are not refugees and migrants. They are navigators and peace seekers. And when I said that, her eyes just grew huge and she got very emotional. And she said, wow. I said, I get the legal definition, but that's not who they are. See, if you see yourself as a refugee and migrant, what do you see yourself as? A problem. What do we see you as? A problem. Mm-hmm. But if you're a navigator and peace seeker, what are you? You're a resource. And it just transformed her entire perspective and being. She didn't need to tell her story anymore. She wanted me to go to the United Nations and deliver this medicine. And I expounded on that. And to me, see, that's the power of a story. That's the power of storytelling, is that because of this place and that we were raised with this very, very special spirit that people call aloha, that we can see the relevance of people and see that connection. And that's really, to me, what Mahina is doing with her children, that can see that connection, that allows me to be one of 150 people in the world that are invited to these dialogues, that allows us to see that we can go to DC and instead of get attention, give them ours. So that what we're doing is we're really finding the story, but we're telling the story of how significant you are. And maybe in that, something very special happens with our economy, our people, and the health and well-being of our people rises, which will rise the economy. That's my final thought, that storytelling is not a small thing. It's a very significant thing, because it's that which I believe affords us the opportunity to connect, but to connect very deeply. Not in an intellectual way, but as Colbert might express, in a very spiritual way. Yeah, and that's my final thought.
All right. Well, I think that's a good way to end our discussion. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and your stories, and hopefully other businesses, organizations, nonprofits are going to be able to take something from this and be able to find their relevance and continue to thrive in the community. So thank you to you, thank you to OEDB, thank you to Olelo for this program, and we hope to continue to share the stories and insights on ways to build the foundation for a stronger community. So for more information on OEDB, or if you would like to have OEDB talk to your company or your board, you can contact them through their website. Aloha.